So going through Lessons in Leadership by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Okay. So Shabbat Shalom. And so this week's Torah portion, Ekev, the title of the chapter here is To Lead is to Listen. So he goes after, he goes after the idea. He breaks down Shema essentially. So what does the word Shema mean? It appears in no less than 92 times in Deuteronomy. So it's a very important word, but it's a word that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs feels that cannot be translated into English properly. There's many different words that are used to translate it. Some examples are to hearken, completely obey, pay attention to, heed, or hear. Also, hear. There's no single English word that means to hear, to listen, to heed, to pay attention to, and to obey. Shema also means to understand. So it has all these meanings that cannot be just easily translated into English. To me, this chapter kind of spoke a lot to me because he kind of talks a lot about how listening is very important. And I feel like I feel like I'm a good listener. I've been told I'm a good listener. But I think after reading this, I feel like there's always room to improve, right? There's always better ways to listen, or in the way he explained it is more in-depth listening. So he said, although the Torah, contains 613 commandments, it does not contain the word to obey. He said, like in modern day Hebrew, they use this word called latzayet, which is an Aramaic word that means to obey. But Shema, I guess, is just deeper. They don't even use that word to say obey in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew. And he said also that blind obedience is not a virtue in Judaism. So Hashem doesn't want us to just blindly obey. He wants us to understand. He wants us to take it to our heart, to understand it, to fully internalize it, right? To just wants us to be it essentially, and he wants us to be a listening people, so that we can listen to our fellow men and listen to him essentially. And then he talks about how Greece was like more of a visual culture. They have all these like great artwork and all these like sculptures and things, and but then you come to Judaism and there's like nothing, no artwork, no idols or anything like that kind of stuff, and that everything is we listen to Hashem. We don't see him. We might see him in his acts, in his creation, but we don't see him. And then he tells a story about Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, and he created this psychotherapy that was kind of like listening, right? So he was like working with different people, and one night he got a call from some woman, and she said that she wanted to commit suicide. And he it was the middle of the night, and she called him, and so he was like talking to her, and he spent 2 hours trying to convince her not to commit suicide. And then in the end, she said okay, and then she hung up, and then the next day he went to talk to her some more, and and he asked her, well, what was the argument that I gave you that convinced you not to commit suicide? And she said, it wasn't any of your arguments. It was just the fact that you were listening to me for 2 hours in the middle of the night. So that's like a very important thing for people. And then there's another story that he talked about, how he would talk to different couples who were having problems, marital, or the issue was the husbands wouldn't give their wives a get. That's called aguna cases, and so they wouldn't give the get to get a divorce, essentially. And so the way he said, they would deal with it is they would have these listening sessions and talk and just listen to each of the couple's arguments. He called it deep listening, and then they were able to reconcile their differences in all these cases, and the couple would be able to work things out, without any kind of judgments from the court or anything like that. And so he said, listening is an intensely therapeutic. So then also later on, he had this other program. He was dealing with different rabbis, a 3-year program in counseling for the various rabbis. And they hired special counselors to teach the rabbis. And then, so they had this, they had to agree to take all the participants away to an enclosed location for 2 days. They wanted to figure out what this was about, and they said what it was is involved an active listening and reflecting, questioning, but no guidance on the part of the therapist. And the rabbis were they didn't like it, right? Because rabbis are they felt like this opposed everything that they stood for. They stood to teach, to direct, to tell people what to do, not just to listen to them and kind of reflect what the person is talking about. But they after an hour-long kind of discussion that they had, they realized that it's this is kind of like what the Shema is about, to listen, and so they came to the conclusion that listening is a key virtue of the religious life, to be listening. So I guess they did use that counseling in their interactions with people. If we want God to listen to us, we have to be prepared to listen to him. And if we learn to listen to him, then we eventually learn to listen to our fellow humans. The silent cry of the lonely, the poor, the weak, the vulnerable, the people in existential pain. And then he talked also, I didn't know this about it. He talked about Solomon. And we know the story about how Hashem came to him in a dream and asked him, what would you want? What do you want? And he said, Lev Shomea, which literally means a listening heart. We oftentimes, I think it in English translates it as wisdom, but it's way more than wisdom. And that was a new revelation to me, because I always thought it was just wisdom. But it says the choice of words is significant. Solomon's wisdom lay, at least in part, in his ability to listen, to hear the emotion behind words, and to sense what was being left unsaid as well as what was said. Then he also tells a story about the Queen of England. He said the royal family is very punctual. They're always like perfect timing and everything, and they come at a certain time and leave at a certain time all the time. But one day she left 2 hours late, which is very unlike the Queen. And that day was anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and she was listening to different stories from these people that were from the Holocaust, and he likened it to how it's just kind of a virtue to listen to people's stories. The reason so she stayed late is because she had to listen to, she listened because she wanted to listen to each and every individual and their stories. So she was late because of that. But it just shows you how important it is. And another thing, he likes to tie back to Moshe, and how Moshe, when he comes to the burning bush, and he says that he is not a great speaker. Moshe replied, "I am not a man of words, not yesterday, not the day before, not from the first time you spoke to your servant. I am slow to speech and tongue. So why would Hashem pick a leader that was not a good speaker? And he likes to give the reason that that he was a good listener. Perhaps because one who cannot speak learns how to listen. And this is for a lesson for all of us. A leader is one who knows how to listen to the unspoken cry of others and to the still small voice of God. So that's the lesson that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs gives us today. All right, who's next?
Shabbat Shalom. I wanted to start off by saying that I wanted to thank Veronica Lael for the opportunity and the pleasure and the honor to get to know her over this time that she's been with us. And as of course we know that she's abandoning us for South Carolina. And we hope that she remembers us in her kingdom in Charleston. And I just wanted to say thank you for bringing a measure of sanity to BA, and you will be greatly missed, and you know your way back. So thank you. May Hashem grant you success, and just everything that you do, may your dreams come true, and you will be greatly missed. So I wanted to start off by actually relating two stories to you, which I think are very much connected to this week's parashah. The first one, in the first aliyah, we read the commandment that is given regarding Birkat HaMazon. You shall eat and be satisfied or satiated, and you will thank the Lord your God. And of course, that's the basis for the commandment. But as we know, the rabbis, or at least the proto-sages, however you want to look at them, added a bracha before, right? We know that this bracha is ancient, and one of the reasons that we know it is because, of course, it's mentioned in the New Testament. And so the New Testament provides us with sort of an interesting confirmation of the antiquity of the practice. Now, why would the rabbis or the proto-sages do this? If the commandment is clear that one does it after. I think it's because they realize that the tendency of human beings is to forget when something is done after the fact, right? And the rabbis, I think, recognize, food is so essential. We take it for granted in the West. We have the privilege and the pleasure of debating organic and non-GMO and all these kinds of things. And these are the problems of the West, right? But if you live in societies where there are subsistence societies, they're just looking for something basic to eat. And so the rabbis, I think, recognize how easy it is for individuals to forget God when food is easy, when it's plentiful, because this is sort of the basic staple, right? Homes, jobs, everything sort of flows after that. You can see the development of society from hunter-gatherers to different types of levels. Once they can till the field and they can harvest, societies develop and grow. So one of the things that's important is the idea of remembering that Hashem is the basis for everything that we have, everything. And so we learn of a story. Rabbi Baruch Gelman tells a story. I believe it was originally taught by Rabbi Avraham Saba, something like that. I can't remember his name. It was about two individuals. They were very poor. One was a shoemaker and one was a lottery. He sold lottery tickets. Lottery tickets actually go far back. It's interesting. And in the story, they were both impoverished. And the guy that sold the lottery tickets tells his friend, why don't you buy a lottery ticket? You may win. I mean, we're both poor, but your need seems to be a little bit more than mine. And the shoemaker says, if I had money to buy a lottery ticket, I would buy food instead. I mean, this is how desperate the situation is. So somehow the lottery ticket vendor saved enough money, bought a ticket, and kept it for his friend. And that was, he wanted to do that for him. And then that night, they had the raffle, whatever they would call that, and he learns that his friend has won. Now you're probably thinking he kept the ticket, but no, he didn't. He loved his friend, and he said, I am so excited. He's a wealthy man. I'm going to go tell him right now. And it was like 12 o'clock at night. He rushes over to the other part of town, and he's banging on the door, and there's no response. So he keeps on banging. The guy gets up finally, and he's half asleep. What are you doing? It's the middle of the night. And he says, you can't believe it. Your ticket won. You're a wealthy man. It's incredible. This is wonderful. And he looks at him, sort of scratching his head. And then he says, so I am the wealthiest man in town. And you just disturbed my sleep. A simpleton, who do you think you are, disturbing the wealthiest man in town? And of course, the point is that how easy it is for us to forget where we come from and where Hashem elevates us to. Now, there's another thing that we need to learn about this particular parasha. At the very beginning, we read V'chaya Ekev Tishme'un. And Ekev is, in this particular context, used as a reward, but we derive the word heel, right? That's where we get Yaakov, right? Jacob. And so Rashi, Rabbi Solomon ben Isaac, understands that when he's talking about the reward for listening, Tishme'un, it's the, or obeying, it has to do with what he calls the kalot. It's the light commandments. The light commandments, you sort of walk, it's easy to walk. You just step. They're not easy. I mean, they're not difficult, right? It's just sort of common sense. Respect people, hear people, those kind of things. And so that's something to keep in mind. Now, if we go back, if we look at some of the stories that relate to the destruction of the temple, which probably would have been more appropriate during 3 weeks or Tisha B'Av, but it's still appropriate here, we learn about the tale of Kamsa and Barkamsa. The Talmud tells us in Tractate Gittin 55 or 56b that there were these two individuals. I think Nathan's up the door. There was a rich man in Jerusalem, and he was a friend of Barkamsa, and then by mistake, Barkamsa was invited. The guy that went out to invite people invited him in, and of course, the rich man hated Barkamsa and was enraged at the fact that he was at his party. And so he told him to go. And so not wanting to be ashamed, Barkamsa says, I'll pay for my meal. The guy says, I don't care, get out. He said, no, I'll pay for half the people. No, get out. And then finally he says, I'll pay for the whole party. I'll pay for everything. Just don't make me suffer this embarrassment. And the guy says, no, get out. Now the tragedy in the story is that the rabbis are present in this banquet and they don't say anything. So Barkamsa is almost angrier at them for not intervening, for not trying to assuage the individual and at least let there be some discreet motion to allow him to stay or something like that. It's an embarrassment. So he hates the rabbis. He sort of abandons Judaism. He goes to the Romans and he says the Jews are planning to rebel. The rabbis are planning to rebel. And they said, well, how are you going to prove this? Well, so he takes an animal. He says, I'm going to, this is going to go in the name of the emperor, but they're going to reject it. And if they reject it, then you know that they're rebelling, because this is sort of the accommodation that the Jews had made with the Roman Empire. They didn't have to sacrifice to the gods of the Romans, to the pantheon, but what they would do is they would offer korbanot on a daily basis on behalf of the emperor. So if you stop that, you're basically saying we're not loyal, and of course that is in fact what triggers the rebellion, because the Antonia fortress was right there, and they could see they're not doing the sacrifice for the emperor. So anyways, what Barkamsa does is he creates a slit in the animal, a small slit, knowing that for the Romans such a sacrifice is not problematic. Small defect is not an issue. But for Jews, it would be. And so the rabbis spot this, and now they're caught in a very difficult situation, because, of course, if they reject it, they're going to face the wrath of the emperor. If they accept it, they might be saying that it's acceptable to offer these imperfect animals. And so there's all these issues. So the rabbis say, well, one of the things we should do without question is kill Barkamsa. That way he won't be able to report back whatever we do back to the Romans. But there's one rabbi, his name is Rabbi Zechariah. I can't remember his last name. But he is sort of argues against all these views. No, we shouldn't accept it. We shouldn't kill him. And in many ways, what Rabbi Baruch Gelman explains is that Rabbi Zechariah is, he feels that he's unable to make a momentous choice because he's not worthy. He doesn't have the status to be able to do that, but somehow he's able to persuade people not to do it. And as a consequence, the sacrifice is not accepted. The Romans see this as rebellion, and the temple is destroyed, of course, as we know. And in many ways, you could almost blame not necessarily Barkamsa, but Rabbi Zechariah for his failure to act in the moment. And so one of the things I think that we can draw from this is twofold, is that the light commandments are not simply easy, they're critical. respecting individuals, making sure that they're not shamed, making sure that you're concerned about their welfare. These are they're very common sense issues, but sometimes we focus in on the commandments that are harder to keep. As somebody said online this week, it's easy for us to focus in on tzitzit or tzitziot, but if you're treating people like a jerk, you're being disrespectful, it doesn't help, right? It only damages the image of God because you're presented as a religious Jew, and yet you're not able to treat people respectfully. And so this is something I think that's important. The other thing that's related to this is that Rabbi Zechariah felt that he was unequal to the task. And what he did is he failed to understand that, what we are living in, 100 years from now, let's assume that we still live, exist as a society, what we are doing here will be history. We are part of that unfolding of the process of human society. And so we cannot simply look to the past and say, oh, this is what they did. We have to recognize that we, in the choices that we make, are making those critical decisions that will impact the future. And so when we emphasize certain commandments, the light commandments, the weightier commandments, these are decisions that impact our children, our grandchildren, Bezrat Hashem, even further than that, our society. And so I think in some sense, what Rabbi Zechariah was doing is maybe he was too humble. He wasn't like, I'm not worthy to be able to weigh in on such a decision. If he is not able to do so, then who is able to do so? When we see right or the community is endangered, we have to act based off the information that we have, and we have to sort of go forth boldly, right? We have to trust in Hashem, but we have to know that, what would be the word? Passivity is not really an option, because events will transpire whether we're active or not. We can only engage evil or righteousness if we are active. If we stand by and things happen, the idea of standing passively by isn't really a defense. It's something that you have to actively be concerned with. And of course, back to the term Ekev, it's the heel, it's the walking, it's the process of living out our lives in a way that we put the mitzvot into action. So may Hashem give us the ability to recognize that we influence not only things that happen in our own life, but in the lives of our families and friends and communities, and that Hashem has a special purpose and plan that we are tasked to fulfill in this life.